I want to start with a quote from Faust by Goethe. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. That is the truest statement you will ever hear. And I want to begin today by talking about one of the most controversial people of the 20th century, whose boldness is unquestionable. I mean unquestionable. But when I say controversial, folks, I mean controversial. I would say that at least 50% of all Americans despise this man. He is a hero. And I'm not wrong, at least 50%. I would say most Americans believe that he spent his life objectifying women. You know why? He did. It's precisely what he did. He spent his life as a personal life example of a catastrophe. His entire life was flawed so badly, it's hard to imagine anyone can possibly screw up their life that badly. He did. And he's one of my heroes? But I want to throw a few other ideas about this man. Probably all of you have already figured out what I'm talking about. He was the most staunch defender of the First Amendment in American history, and he never wavered. He was the first man in the 1950s to bring civil rights to white America by putting Ella Fitzgerald and Nat King Cole on a program with white entertainers. Was unheard of in 1959, and he did it. And the Southern television producers called him up and said, "Oh, you do that, we will pull it from the South. There's not one person in the South who will see your television program." His response, I'll just say, was an impossible personal act. AIDS came along in the 1980s, no one wanted to touch it. Even the President of the United States at the time didn't want to touch that subject matter. My hero did, and he went right at it. He was an animal activist his entire life, and he never wavered. So let's put together some of the pieces. Born in Chicago, 1926, he was a shy, awkward kid. Really terribly shy. First girlfriend in high school left him for his best friend. And the second one, Millie Williams, he would stay with for many years. And when she went on to the University of Illinois, he followed her, became editor-in-chief of their newspaper called Shaft. 1948, junior year, a report comes out by a man named Alfred Kinsey. It was a report on male sexuality. In the few places it wasn't banned, blacklisted, avoided, or burned, the people who read it were shocked. They were shocked. Why? No one talked about sex in the 1940s. It was taboo. No one was willing to touch it. You see, after World War II, America became completely conformist. Now, when I say conformist, I mean puritanical conformist. How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? You do it by creating an image. And oh, our government did that beautifully. Marry your high school sweetheart. Buy a little home in suburbia. Have 2 kids. Get a good paying job. Work your behind off. Get a gold watch. Retire. Drop dead. There was your life. Individuality? Hell no! No one is allowed to have individual thinking or individuality. That's unheard of. So when the Kinsey report came out, our fearless writer began writing about sex. He actually had the unmitigated gall of writing that it was natural and healthy. Nobody in America wanted to hear this. No one wanted to read this. Then he had the gall of making the co-ed of the month, featuring one of the girls in the college. Oh, censors were all over him. The people who ran the school, the headmaster, all over him. Didn't stop him. And when he graduated, he had one clear objective. He wanted the dream job. 1950-51. If a woman brought her to read a magazine, she had 1,000 choices. If a man wanted to read a magazine that wasn't about guns or hunting, he had one choice. One choice. That's it. And it was called Esquire. Esquire was a sophisticated men's magazine. They spoke about cocktails and jazz and Picasso. Oh, this was the job he wanted. He couldn't wait. And after months and months of trying to get a job, they gave him one. As a copywriter, he didn't care. He was in the one place he wanted to be. And he started to voice his opinion, and he started to write what he felt. And you know what they told him at Esquire? No, we can't do that. This is a conformist America. We have to follow the script. So Esquire removed pinup girls. Esquire stopped talking about anything that was taboo like sex. And our hero got frustrated, and more frustrated, and more frustrated. And when he asked for $5 an hour raise, $5 raise, as they used to say in the Bronx, they told him no. So what did he do? He found boldness, because boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Borrowed $1,000 from his mom. He borrowed $2,000 from his college roommate, Eldon Sellers. Borrowed $3,000 from his younger brother, Keith. Met some of Sellers' friends who were quasi-investors, and he pickpocketed $600 here, $500 here, $1,000 here. Sold his furniture for $600. And he put together $8,000 to start his own magazine. $8,000! Yes, it's 1953 at this stage. Do you understand? Starting a magazine with $8,000, how utterly insane that is? 30 years earlier, Time magazine began with a budget of $86,000. $8,000 in 1953? No one can start a magazine on that kind of money. But he sat at his kitchen table with his college roommate and another friend, and they started putting together a magazine. Yes, a men's magazine. And yes, a sophisticated one that spoke about cocktails and jazz and Picasso. But he needed a pinup girl. And in 1953, there was only one if you wanted to launch a magazine. But how do you get her? If you were around in the 50s, I don't think anyone here was, well, all right. The only pinup girl was named Marilyn Monroe. How would you get her? Even more so, how would you get her a new photo of her? And then, going through a magazine, newspaper, just randomly one day, frustrated, unable to figure out this puzzle, right in front of him appeared a Chicago calendar maker who owned the only naked pictures of Marilyn Monroe in the world. Right in his backyard in Chicago, there he was. Of his $8,000 budget, $2,000 was left. He knew that wouldn't do it. His publisher had a photo that was worth many times that. He was certain that everyone had asked about it and was rejected. So, with $1,000 of cash shoved in his pocket, he walked over to this publisher. He said, "I want to buy all the rights to your photos of Marilyn." No one had asked the publisher before. No one had ever asked him. No one had the nerve to ask him. The publisher didn't know how to respond. Sat back there, thought for a minute, and said, "Well, I can't let it go for less than $600. At which point our hero jumped up, turned around, bit his lip, because he didn't want the publisher to see that he was giving a 1953 version of Yes! And he did. Then he turned around, looked at him dead seriously and said, "That's a lot of money. I'll give you $500. And he accepted. He accepted. And he walked out with the only photo that you could have launched this type of magazine. And they were putting it together, and they had a name, a great name. They called it Stag Party. Stag Party. 1 week away from the launch of the magazine, 6 days away, comes the famous lawyer letter. Chris, you know this lawyer letter. It's called a copyright infringement. You see, there was a hunting magazine out there called Stag. And the publisher didn't like the idea that there was a new magazine coming out called Stag Party. The lawyer said, "You print it, we sue you." 6 days before the launch. They needed a name. They needed a name for this magazine. They're running out of time. Well, his college roommate's mom worked for an automobile company that had an unusual name. It was called Playboy. They liked the name. And Playboy and Hugh Hefner were born. The launch of the magazine sold 70,000 copies. This is unheard of. By the end of the year, they were profitable. So you have some idea, guys. Sports Illustrated was issued, first issue, almost the same date as Playboy. It took Sports Illustrated 9 years to become profitable. Playboy was profitable year 1. By year 3, they were by far outselling, outperforming Esquire magazine. In 3 years, they got bigger than the one magazine he dreamed of working and refused to give him a $5 raise. He was bigger. Television programs, clubs, record labels. By the end of the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, he had produced the third most recognizable brand in the world after Apple and Coca-Cola. So I ask you, when you judge Hugh Hefner, maybe think of him just slightly differently than a ridiculous lunatic who objectified women, because he did change the world. Which brings me to my first speaker. It's 20 years ago when some lawyer who worked for a very close friend of mine called, wanted to present at the round table an idea to bring the Grand Prix to New York City. And I thought to myself, that is so bold that it's almost incredible. And this guy must be a few fries short of a Happy Meal if he believes that in this cesspool of corruption he can actually bring the Grand Prix and get it approved. But he had the unbelievable boldness to try. And boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. I was very impressed with Chris Warren that day. No, he never got past the cesspool of New York corruption, but he gave it one hell of a try and started his own law firm. which got bigger and bigger and bigger in those next 20 years, to the point that he became recognized as one of the country's best litigators against the SEC, FINRA, and the Attorney General's office. I know this because Chris is my personal attorney. And if you know me well, you know I have no issues, regulatory issues, and never have. Right, Deb?
Not a one.
Right. No issues with the SEC, with FINRA, with the Attorney General. No. But I do have a very big mouth. And I'm not afraid to use it. And it gets me in trouble at times, right, honey? It gets me in a lot of trouble at times. Chris has been the one who comes in on the white horse after I tell the FCC what they can go do with themselves. And yes, I tell them to do a biological act that is impossible. It's Chris who comes in every time and bails me out. Whether it's contracts or disclaimers, I depend on him, and he's always done the right thing. He's also a center of influence par excellence, having so many people at his disposal. Whenever he gets together an investor, an entrepreneur, and a broker-dealer, which quite frankly is usually me, he puts deals together. No, he's not a broker-dealer, but as a center of influence, folks, he is a terrific person to be aware of. I don't like many attorneys in this world. No. In fact, I hate most of the attorneys in this world. I'm going to bring you today someone I genuinely like. Chris Warren, get up here.
Stephen asked me to speak today, and I had no idea what to talk about. And he said, tell me how you started the firm and why you did it. And I said, because I was dumb and stubborn, Stephen. That's not a very good story. But that's essentially it. That's what led me to eat canned tuna fish for months and make almost no money for an entire year, was because I believed that I could do it. I'll take you back to the beginning. So when I was 10, no, just kidding. But not far after that, my very first entrepreneurial job, because I'm getting the vibe that what Stephen really is trying to drive here is to believe in yourself, to take the steps that no one else will take, because that's crazy. Why would you do that? So I was 12 years old, and I got a job selling Christmas trees on the corner. And this guy left me in charge, 12 years old, to sell these trees. People come, pay cash, $20, and $30 for a tree. Comes back a couple hours later, and I show him the log of all the transaction. He goes, there's no way that tree was $25. I'm like, no, that's what I sold the tree for. And he goes, empty your pockets. I'm like, why? This is because I think that you skimmed. And I'm like, what's skimming? He's like, that means you sold it for more and pocketed the difference. And I'm like, oh, you could do that? And he's like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. Next year, same thing. I went and I bought a bunch of Christmas trees, and I went down the block and put them on the block and sold them for more than I bought them for when I was 13. So thanks to that guy for teaching me how to skim. And from there, I kind of knew what I was going to do. When I graduated, before I even graduated from college, I opened up a business. When I was 18 years old, I opened up a business. When I was 19 years old, I opened up another business. When I was going to school, I opened up another business. I was a registered rep in financial services, just like Stephen and his crew. When I opened the firm and I started to expand it, it was 2019. In 2020, I'm not sure, how many people are here in financial services? So one person. Who else? What do we got around the room? What are we doing here? Just shout out. What? Real estate. Okay, real estate. Oof. And transportation. Finance. I'm very sorry. Sir? You don't know what you do? Okay, cool. Oh, that's exciting. What about over here on the right side of the room? Small group, so. Huh? You writer, a writer. Entertainment. Okay. Student. Engineering and real estate. Okay. You know, it comes down to, you know, if I'm going to follow the theme that Stephen's kind of laid out, a little bit of boldness. So I decided in 2020, after not making any money, that I was going to double down on building out the law firm. And luckily, I was in an industry, financial services, that was impacted in a different way by COVID. Right? During COVID, everyone had different challenges. Real estate had its own challenges, but real estate thrived. A lot of people were out of jobs, out of business. But the one thing that happened right after you called your friends and your family to make sure everyone was okay was you called your broker. You called your financial services rep. You called the guy who was holding your money and said, what is going on? And they didn't know what was going on, because they were stuck at home. They weren't allowed to be in their offices. And I said at that point, now is the time. Now is the time. The world is so focused on this thing, but the thing that everyone cares about, health and money, they're still moving. Wall Street's still open. The brokers are getting phone calls. The financial services reps are busy. They're answering phones, their own phone, their personal phone, which they're not supposed to do. They're answering emails on their home emails, which they're not supposed to do. They're doing everything that the regulatory agencies say, you're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. But you know what I learned is that they cared. They really cared. It's professionals. They're professionals. They're like doctors or lawyers or accountants. They're saying, I have a family of 4. The guy that had the job is now out of work, and all of his money was in blank and blank and blank, and now it's worth half, and they have no income. Holy crap, I got a lot of work to do, right? And how do I do this with my laptop in my living room? So we helped them, and I grew a practice and invested time, money, energy into something that everyone said I should not be doing. They said, get a job. That's it. Close it up. Get a job while you can. We don't know what's happening. And I said, no, I am not going to do that. All right. I had a vision. I had a mission. I had, if you call it it was a fool's errand to a lot of people, but it was mine to me. And I grew a firm to over 20 lawyers in 3 years, which is kind of insane. But it worked out because, just like in the broker-dealer business, I knew my customer, right? And I knew my customer, and they knew their craft, and I knew my craft. And I just leaned into, if I can provide value, if I can provide service, if I can be one of the voices of reason when there is a FINRA enforcement investigation or an SEC investigation or the DOJ or the AG comes knocking with a subpoena, how do I respond to that? With a human touch, right? This is the government. They have unlimited resources. How do you fight the government? We tell a story, right? This is what my client happened. This is what was going on in the world and in his life. He didn't do something malicious. In most cases, they just made a mistake that they didn't even know they made. He's not an international money launderer. That's insane. But the point is that you connect with people and you provide a value, provide a service, and you do it boldly, right? You create and craft the story that mirrors the truth and guide them through what is sometimes the most difficult part of their lives, where their careers, their livelihoods, sometimes their freedoms are at risk for something that they thought was their dream. Right, that they were fighting for, that they were building, that they were doing to serve other people and provide value. So my colleague, John George, was supposed to be here today to join me, but there was an FBI raid on one of our clients' homes and he was arrested. So unfortunately, he's detained and so is the client. But nonetheless, he can't be here to join us, and he was going to talk about blockchain technology, advances and things that are happening in the securities world as it related to this. But I will say that I know quite a bit about it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure what else Stephen would like me to speak about, but I'm happy to answer a question or two if anyone wants, or happy to yield the floor to whoever else is ready to speak.
Give everyone a second.
Chris, that was exceptional.
Oh, well, thanks.
I'm intrigued
Intrigued of what?
as a writer in national
Oh,
FBI.
sure. I mean, that's, yeah, they do bad things.
So, no, was it a securities issue?
Yes, it was a securities issue. So,
Imagine you can't go into detail.
Sure. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, this young man raised a fair amount of capital in the millions and millions of dollars. There was a subsequent SEC investigation, which we were responding to and involved in. And then when the DOJ decides to indict someone, right, the FBI will sometimes, before they indict them, will do an investigation, but usually they come and arrest them, right? So that's what happened in this case. While we're working on the SEC subpoena and responding to the SEC's inquiries and crafting the story, hey, this is what the truth is, not what you guys are saying it is, the FBI came in and knocked on the door.
And this is your concentration.
Right, so business dissolution, partnership dissolution, so business divorce or business-to-business disputes. Any government investigations, so SEC, DOJ, FINRA, administrative agencies, state agencies like the Attorney General, Department of Finance, there's something called blue sky laws, which are specific securities laws for each state, as well as the federal securities laws. And we do on the other side too, so M&A work, exempt securities offerings, Reg D offerings, so for real estate, for instance, you raise capital to do something with. And something that Stephen mentioned, which I should mention, is that I do believe that everything that happens in life happens through other people, right? It's not your network is your net worth, right? I know everyone's heard that before, but it's 100% correct. So, I like to serve as a nexus between people in business, people in finance, people in securities, startup businesses, everyone that's in that world, to meet each other. So I host events at my office. I have poker nights. I have ping pong tournaments. I have charity events. I do all the same thing that Stephen does, we do as well, to connect people with other people to help them advance their dreams and their goals and their business ideas, and to find investors like you did, one at a time, right? Someone who can believe in the vision and see it and say, hey, that's a good idea. I want to be involved in that, or I can help you with your idea, and this is how I can help you with your idea, which is fantastic. I love seeing that happen. As a connector, it's the best part of my job, is seeing other people succeed, and I want to help them do that. So for me, it's very fulfilling. Thanks for the question. Sir?
I presume that, maybe I'm wrong on this, but most legal practices are organized by state. So if you want to do something, whether it's federal or otherwise in the state, you've got to be recognized in that state. And so how do you cover the world, so to speak?
Well, with federal jurisdiction, if someone receives a subpoena in Ohio, I can work with that client and respond to the subpoena. It's right. And so when there's active litigation, depending on the jurisdiction, right, then I can still help, or we something called pro hac vice, so I can get into a jurisdiction with local counsel. But most investigations don't wind up in court. They're usually resolved before, which is a good thing, right? You want to resolve these things before they turn into lawsuits. If it turns into a lawsuit, that's a different animal entirely, and the amount of resources required to fight the government are quite a bit. So it's usually in the best interest of the client to find a way to resolve it before it gets that far.
So like Menendez, I believe, felt that it wasn't going to go that far, and obviously,
He was indicted this morning, yeah. So, but that's a good question. FINRA, too, is an administrative agency, so it's not actually bound by a specific jurisdiction other than their jurisdiction. So it's not an in-court proceeding, so you don't need to be licensed in the state of Ohio, for instance, to work with a client that's in Ohio. But to answer your question, we're licensed in, I believe, 11 states, and we have connections with other attorneys in our same practice areas and fields in a lot of states, and that's helpful. Right, exactly. So if I need someone in Texas, I have a lawyer in Texas I've worked with saying, Joe, can you please help me out with this case? And he'll say, sure. Or, no, but I know someone who can, and he lives over here. And attorneys do that all the time. Because you're right, we can't cover the whole world. All right, yes?
You mentioned when you were like 18, 19, 20, like opening up like business. What are you like doing?
Failing. Over and over and over again. But failing forward and learning from my mistakes. Find mentors. Find people that have been down the road, and they'll say, hey, there's a giant hole there, and you're going to step in it anyway, but at least you'll know that you're going to step in it. You know, taking your lumps and learning from your mistakes is a very, very valuable tool. And to take that away would cheapen it, and you wouldn't be the same leader. You wouldn't be the same business owner if you didn't make mistakes, right? But you have to have a lodestone, a guide, you know, something that guides you forward, and saying, why is it that I want to do this thing? What is it that what am I trying to accomplish here? And if your decisions are guided by that path, which is, I want to provide the best possible customer service I can to this person, this type of person, or to this industry, or I want to become the expert on that thing. And your decisions are then guided by, that's my direction. And that's how you do that. And yes, you're going to make mistakes, but at least you know where you're going. All right, you had one too.
Yeah, I guess following that, when you were starting your firm and building it, if you could describe some of the challenges you faced along the way, and you know, convincing other lawyers to join you on this like new venture.
I read this in a book somewhere, and I'm not sure which one it was. But I learned that leadership is not about getting people to necessarily follow you, right? It's not about, hey, it's not a spotlight on me, right? It's the opposite. It's a spotlight on them. It's a spotlight on who I'm speaking to. This is the path that I see. This is the vision. And I think this is how your life would look like here. And people follow entrepreneurs, they follow leaders, they follow ideas and concepts, not because they want to see where that person's going, but because they want to see where they're going. They follow leaders because they're curious about, hey, if I did this, and this guy clearly has a vision of what this is going to look like in the direction he's going, what would that work like for me? And it's selling the dream, right? Which is, this is the business model, or this is the focus of the business, or this is the type of clientele we want, or this is the type of atmosphere or culture that I've built. Right? When I started the firm, I had 2 rules: no billable hours and no jerks. That was it. That was the 2 rules of the law firm. Because I didn't want to work with people I didn't like, and I didn't want to feel pressured to meet certain requirements. I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
Do you feel like the opposite is commonplace with other firms?
No comment. No comment on that. There certainly is a certain culture that, and since the pandemic, has definitely changed, right? People want to be able to have a seat at the table. People want to be able to make decisions or be a part of decisions that they feel are impacting their lives. and they want flexibility in the way they live their lives. I want to work from home Fridays. Okay, so work from home on Fridays, right? Matter of fact, we have a policy in the firm, you can work anywhere in the world 1 week per quarter. Just go. You're allowed to go. We encourage you to go.
There are no laws.
That's a business model question, but basically it's if you want to make $100,000, this is how you make $100,000. You want to make $200,000, this is how you make $200,000.
So you do a, so can the field
It's a little more complicated. I'm happy to have an individual conversation with you about that, but basically the way I started the business was people focused instead of profit focused. So I said, if you want to do this and you want to work here, this is what your expectations are. And the expectations are what you want. What do you want? I want to make a certain number, or I want to live a certain lifestyle, or I want to work remotely from home, or I want to be able to travel, or I want to spend more time with my kids. Right. What is it that you want? And then I'll build everything else around that so that you can have the life that you desire and also have your financial needs met. I think that's what you're asking.
Chris, outstanding.
Oh, last one. That's all right.
You were saying look to leaders, when in fact you're really saying look to influencers. Not all leaders are influencers. Even though they may appear to be successful, somebody else was the influencer in that group. You're looking for the influencers.
So I'm not going to disagree with you and say that I'm looking for influencers, but I will say that without a team and without people, right, then I would not have a business. I would not have a law firm. I would have nothing, right? So the assets of a service business like real estate, like financial services, like law, are people. They walk out the door every day, right? And they want to come back. You want them to come back. It has to be about how do I promote them, right? How do I make them become a center of influence for them, right? In whatever goal or dream or vision or whatever it is that they see for their own business, their own future, their own firm, whatever it is that they're trying to build, right?
I would say you are an influencer, no question, but I can guarantee you not all leaders are influencers.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, perhaps. And, this is, I'm not sure if Hugh Hefner was an influencer or not. He seemed like a pretty fun kind of guy. I would say that Steven Feldstein is certainly an influencer. And I'm grateful again, Stephen, for the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you to you and your family. And it's so thank you so much all for your patience, and I appreciate the opportunity.